Sukuigar! Greetings, I am Tad Larkin, the lore master of Mandalore! And today, I will be digging through the archives to elaborate on the most famous warrior culture in the galaxy, the Mandalorians. The Mandalorians are an ancient and proud warrior culture that's been around long before the establishment of the Galactic Republic, and has numbers spanning across the vast reaches of the galaxy. These warriors are nomadic, meaning that they will never settle in one place, and because of this, a lot of Mandalorians grow up never even seeing the planet Mandalore where the culture first developed. As a direct result of this, Mandalorians, and the planet Mandalore for that matter, have no central government, and are comprised of groups of tribes called clans. Though these clans often bicker and even at times fight against one another, every Mandalorian is expected to heed the call of the Manda-LORE, Grand Chieftain of the Mandalorians. In the past, the Manda-LORE was a being of absolute power, and with a single order could unite all of the clans to rally behind him or her, and declare crusades, holy wars promising glorious combat to all that follow. In more recent years, the position of Manda-LORE holds much less power, but by no means less venerability. He or she is a widely respected individual, often mitigating differences between clans and setting an overall example for the Mandalorians. However, he or she still maintains the ability to rally all the clans in times of war or great crisis. Modern Mandalorian society is absent of religion. However, ancient Mandalorians were polytheistic, worshipping three gods: Arasum, the god of stagnation and sloth; Kad-Harangir, the god of change, growth, and destruction; and Hod-Haran, the trickster, god of the fickle nature of fortune. The worship of these gods was practiced by conducting war as a ritual, and the conquest of thousands of planets were carried out to appease these gods, until it was war itself that eventually became the object of worship, giving way to the Mandalorian crusades that plagued the Galactic Republic in its early years. Though these beliefs would be widely abandoned after the reign of Mandalore the Indomitable, circa 4000 BBY, a lot of Mandalorians still believe in the Manda, which is a collective oversoul or transitory realm where a Mandalorian soul would go upon his or her death to protect their family in the afterlife. The dissolution of these religious beliefs would eventually give way to the Canons of Honor, a code of conduct in which Mandalorians were expected to adhere if they wished to attain eternal glory and personal honor. The Rezolnare, which came later, simplified the Canons of Honor and broke them down into 6 essential tenets for living as a true Mandalorian. Wear the armor, speak the language, defend oneself and family, raise your children to be Mandalorians, and rally to the Mandalore when he or she calls. In 60 BBY, these tenets would be included in the Super Commando Codex by Mandalore Jaster Mareel, as he sought to reform the Mandalorians, who, at that point, had devolved into petty raiders and pirates, preying on any cargo ship that came through the Mandalore sector. The Super Commando Codex is a long and tedious list of reforms. However, the basics can be boiled down to this: if you want to be a farmer, farm. If you want to be a trader, trade. But never forget that you are a Mandalorian. First and always, Mandalorians are fighters, no matter how they choose to make their money. This, combined with the Rezolnare, encouragement of professional soldiery, and discouragement of piracy and raiding for sport, made up the core of the Super Commando Codex. Jaster Mareel's manifesto would eventually end up dividing the Mandalorians, and plunging them into a brutal civil war, one from which they wouldn't fully recover until after the Galactic Civil War decades later. Moving on to language, the Mandalorian language, or Mandoa, is a highly developed spoken and written language with its own alphabet and grammar, capable of being translated into the Galactic Basic Standard. For example, Sukui Gar, Ner Gai Tad Larkin, Ha'ar Ryutolor Be Mandayim, or, Greetings, my name is Tad Larkin, the lore master of Mandalore. Sukui Gar being a traditional greeting, literally translating to, You're still alive. While Ryut Alor, I had to combine the words Ryut, meaning history, and Alor, meaning leader, seeing that there is no word in the Mandoa vocabulary for lore master. Mondoa has allowed for the creation of many songs and poems using the language. Most are either drinking songs or war chants, my favorite of which being the Da Werda Verda, translating to Rage of the Shadow Warriors. The Da Werda Verda is a chant as well as a dance that is ceremonially performed before combat, where participants are expected to drum on the armor plates of themselves as well as the person next to them. And if one participant so much as missed a beat or misspoke a lyric, the person next to them was expected to punch him or her in the face as hard as they could. They would then have to recover and rejoin the chant. This chant is considered a staple of Mandalorian tradition, so much so that when 75 Mandalorians were called upon by Jango Fett to train the clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic in 32 BBY, they taught it to their clone trainees as well, many of whom performed the chant before battles during the Clone Wars. As I mentioned before, the first tenet of the Rezol Nare is wear the armor, and nothing is more important to a Mandalorian than his or her armor. Though the style and aesthetic attributes of the Mandalorian armor change over the millennia, one thing usually remains common: the material. I'm talking, of course, about Mandalorian Iron. Mandalorian Iron, or Beskar, is found only on Mandalore, and possesses the unique physical property of being resistant to the extreme heat caused by the blade of a lightsaber, making it one of a small handful of metals in the galaxy that can deflect a blow from a lightsaber. The Mandalorian word for armor is Beskar Gam, directly translating to iron skin, and only the Mandalorian armorsmiths on Mandalore know how to work and form the metal. All Aruatai, or outsider, attempts to reproduce the material were met with catastrophic failure. The Mandalorians can be seen wearing their iconic armor not just in combat scenarios, but in everyday life. If you were to walk the city streets of Keldabe, Mandalore's only permanent settlement, you would see everyone going about their daily routines, visiting shops and working jobs, all dressed head to toe in full combat armor, and what a sight it is to see. Probably the two most important tenets of the Rezol Nare are defend oneself and family, and raise your children to be Mandalorians, as family is one of the most sacred things to a Mandalorian. However, family by Mandalorian standards is a little different than family in other parts of the galaxy. As an old Mandalorian proverb states, Alit Orishia Taldin, family is more than blood, illustrating the Mandalorian value of personal bonds over blood relation. It was not uncommon for Mandalorians to adopt comrades they fought in battles with as their brothers and sisters, or Vode, and of course, adoption of younger Mandalorians without parental figures in their life was also common. A lot of adopted Mandalorians were orphans of war, ferocious or tenacious children who impressed their would-be parents with their perseverance, making them ideal candidates for adoption. This act of adoption was known as Gai Bal Manda, and could be officiated saying a short phrase, Ni Kirtail Gai Sa'ad, meaning, I know your name as my child. Seeing that the first Mandalorians weren't even human, they were Tong, Mandalorians are by no means xenophobic, and over the years, through adoption, a healthy population of alien Mandalorians is maintained, and throughout history, it's not uncommon to see Rodian, Twi'lek, Iktachi, Mandalian, Toygorian, or even Wookiee Mandalorians. Marriage between Mandalorians was officiated in a similar way to adoption. No long ceremonies or bureaucratic paperwork, just an utterance of the phrase, Mi solas tom, mi solas dar tom. Mi Medinuir An, Mi Bajarir Verde. We are one when together, we are one when parted. We will share all, we will raise warriors. And divorce was officiated in much the same way. While the exchanging of the vows were private, it was customary for the whole clan to come out and celebrate with drinks and festivities, some of which lasted for days. Same-sex marriages were viewed with the same legitimacy as traditional marriages. Mandalorian children who are conceived naturally are generally raised by their mother for the first 8 years of their life, learning lessons in clan loyalty, discipline, courage, respect, and the basics of martial combat, while after age 8, they go off with their fathers for basic military and survival training. Both boys and girls went through this, as the concept of gender in Mandalorian society is meaningless. Ke Barjarir Gar Ade, Jagishade Kotla, E Dalish Ade Kotla Shia. Train your sons to be strong, but your daughters to be stronger. At age 13, Mandalorian children go through an important rite of passage known as the Vergoten, where the youth would be placed in a scenario where he or she must use the techniques and skills taught to them by their parents, and only then would they be considered a Mandalorian. Because of the lack of importance placed on sex, Mandalorian women were expected to be just as tough and resourceful as Mandalorian men, often fighting on the front lines alongside them. This makes strong and enduring women more desirable than physically attractive ones by outsider standards. This equality didn't mean that men and women didn't have their respective roles, however. Women were typically tasked with raising the children while they're young, as I mentioned before, as well as cooking, while men were often away hunting or working jobs. These roles often changed as the children grew older or if there were no children involved at all. When it comes to the subject of death in Mandalorian culture, there are some interesting practices of note. Because of their nomadic nature, there exists no cemeteries or tombs on Mandalore, and seeing that most Mandalorians died in combat on the battlefields, a lot were buried in mass graves on foreign worlds. Warriors who died heroically or respected individuals who died of old age were often cremated on great funeral pyres, surrounded by friends and loved ones. No matter the individual, it was common for mementos to be taken by the deceased's loved ones, more often than not, their armor, or a piece of their armor if a full set couldn't be recovered. Some even wore these armor pieces proudly to honor their loved one. The Mandalorian outlook on death is bittersweet, or ayahan in Mandoa. Rather than dwelling on the fact that their friend or loved one is deceased, they would remember them as how they lived. In other words, they would celebrate their life rather than mourn their death. As long as you kept their memory alive, they were not considered dead, and the practice of reciting the names of all the loved ones you've lost over the years was a common way Mandalorians kept their memories alive. This gives way to the common Mandalorian proverb, Nukira Dish Shitabe Chargla, not gone, merely marching away. This ends my findings on the Mandalorian culture. If you have any suggestions for future transmissions, don't be afraid to drop a comment. In the meantime, keep your comm channels open for future transmissions. And don't forget to subscribe. Tad Larkin, out.